We have an issue, and our EAM has laid it out very clearly in many of his speeches.
Right.
What is our issue with China?
Correct.
And how we would like to obviously have a modus vivendi with China, but provided they meet us halfway.
Absolutely. Which they are not doing at all.
If they have not done so, then I don't see why I should be worried about what they feel about India and the US relations. It's as simple as that. I mean, we do what is in our interest.
Hello and welcome to StratNewsGlobal. On the gist this evening, I have a special guest, Ambassador PS Raghavan, who is now the chairman of the National Security Advisory Board and our former ambassador to Russia some years ago, and a strategic thinker who is, of course, a prolific writer and a thinker. So we thought we'll get him over to discuss the outcome of the Prime Minister Modi visit to U.S. and what is the world looking at and how the world is looking at as far as this new U.S.-India bonhomie is concerned. So welcome to this program.
Thank you very much. Very nice to be with you.
Thank you. So let me start by asking your first impressions. Of course, we've heard so much of analysis and commentary, but as an experienced diplomat and an observer, where is the U.S.-India relationship at this point that you see?
Let me say, it's become quite a cliche to call every visit a landmark visit. And therefore, when you call it a landmark visit, then people think that it's replaying the same old record.
Right.
But I think this visit of Prime Minister Modi qualifies in every substantive measure to be called a landmark visit.
Okay.
Now, of course, you look at the atmospherics of it, the entire form that went into it, the kind of red carpet they rolled out for him. Once again, I think we need to understand, the Americans don't do this every day for everybody.
That's right.
It's a superpower and they have other interests.
Yes.
So, in their case, it is not form for form's sake. Form has to reflect substance.
Right.
Otherwise, they wouldn't do it. And that you can see. This is only the third state visit that President Biden has hosted in his term in office.
Sure.
So, from that itself, you understand that there is a strategic convergence that was out there to be displayed, which is what this visit displayed.
Sure.
And then you step behind the form and you look at the substance of it. There is so much there that you cannot cover it in the space of one program like this.
What you're doing, exactly.
But if you look at it from the strategic perspective, if you look at it from the technology perspective, if you look at it from the people to people, the exchanges, there is something in every aspect of that which this visit actually showed.
Right.
But if you want me to home in on the one big picture.
Exactly, because you will know where to
the strategic, we need to look at the strategic underpinning of the India-U.S. relationship.
That's right.
Many people would ask, this is what has been going on for the last 20 years.
Right.
We started this discussion about the strategic partnership in the early 2000s.
Exactly.
We had this nuclear deal, which was a very major deal, and you should not underestimate the impact of that deal on India's strategic standing as well as India-U.S. relations.
Sure. And yet,
what happened? Things flagged a little bit.
Sure.
Things flagged a little bit because on both sides, attention wavered, attention wandered.
Yes.
But today you have reached a stage where the external circumstances force us to focus much more on what we need to do with each other. So it's not only Russia and Ukraine, it is also the U.S. China confrontation, and it is India's own deteriorating relations with China.
Exactly.
So you put these three together, then you see the obvious strategic convergence that both the U.S. and India have grasped.
Yes.
Also the fact that so many of these things that have not happened, we recognize they have not happened because some things the Americans didn't do and some things we didn't do.
Exactly.
Let's be frank about it.
Sure, absolutely.
So you have today tried to establish structures and establish processes that try to address some of the things that were not done before and to take it forward. So if you look at what technology, look at this, the whole range of technologies that we're talking about, civil, military, space,
quantum.
quantum. What are we doing? We are now engaging not just the two governments.
No.
Now, when you engage the two governments, there's a mismatch because, while we have a lot of things that government manages and supervises,
Right.
in America, it's all private sector.
Absolutely.
So you've now got the private sector into it.
Correct.
You've got academia, research institutions into it. And we've got the same on our side.
Right.
So we are beginning to do things which are recognizing both the urgency of the matter and the shortcomings of the past.
Sure.
And try to see how we can...
So lessons learned from those shortcomings that you were mentioning.
Absolutely.
And just take one small example, and you will know this because DTTI, for instance, in defense, was supposed to be a breakthrough initiative at one point in time, and it looked very promising. Didn't go anywhere. But yet now we have gone into something called INDEX. ISET is there, and INDEX, of course, is part of that, of the ISET. Now, ISET itself is very ambitious. Space, quantum technology, AI, semiconductors.
The entire spectrum.
The entire spectrum. But semiconductors, I thought, was very interesting because, again, the private sector is involved there in a larger way from the American side. Now, are we in India ready to absorb what is going to come from there? Is something that maybe you are looking at it a little closely than others do.
See, we have to be able to absorb it.
Right.
And once you get the private sector into it, once you get them engaged in it, once you begin to trust them to actually take this forward, it will happen. Actually, there is again a whole change in a paradigm shift in the way technologies are developing today. If you look at 20 years ago, most major technologies were developed in the defense sector,
Right.
and then they moved into the civilian sector.
Exactly.
Today, quite the reverse is happening. You've got what you might call the democratization of technology. So they are developed in the civilian space and then are used in defense. And if you see the war in Ukraine, you can see the manifestation of this.
Sure.
Where so many of the video games makers got drafted in to create
scenarios
which actually helped in the war.
That's right.
So essentially today, if you ignore the private sector, you're not into technology development.
And I think India's NSA, Mr. Ajit Doval, said this very well in that ISET meeting in Delhi just before they went to U.S. I mean, the Indian delegation went to the U.S., where he said, in January, I was not so confident, but now I know that with the private sector involvement, it is doable. So I think that recognition itself is a paradigm change, what you're talking about.
It is. It is born out of an understanding of why all previous efforts failed. By the way, there was a precursor to DTTI as well, which I was involved in. So, all of those did not work because of these reasons, because you did not quite understand the paradigm shift in the way technology operates today.
Exactly. So I'm glad you said that because I think it is going to define in the next decade between U.S. and India. And of course, China is the driving factor in a way because both sides have their problems with China. How would China look at this? What are your assessments on that?
Look, China has been looking at the India-U.S. relationship always with, shall we say, with great interest.
Okay.
To put it mildly.
Yeah.
And the problem, however, is that China's policies have not reflected a proper understanding of the consequence. So if you feel that India-U.S. relationship is becoming too close, you need to take some steps to see whether you can take some initiatives, if not to prevent it,
to
at least to make it in such a way that it does not affect your interest.
Right.
I don't see China doing this.
No.
So how can I comment further on this subject?
Right.
We have an issue, and our EAM has laid it out very clearly in many of his speeches.
Right.
What is our issue with China?
Correct.
And how we would like to obviously have a modus vivendi with China, but provided they meet us halfway.
Absolutely. Which they are not doing at all.
If they have not done so, then I don't see why I should be worried about what they feel about India and the US relations. It's as simple as that. I mean, we do what is in our interest.
Exactly. And that is the other thing that I'm saying. Not that India hasn't done this before, that acting in its own national interest or in self-interest. But I think the manifestation of acting in national interest is much pronounced in the last few years, where you're doing whatever is needed to be done with Russia, At the same time, the Americans also understanding our position on Russia. I mean, do you think that is a better understanding in US?
Without doubt. Actually, what is happening today, this government over the last many years, it has pursued a bold and imaginative foreign policy that understands the transformation in the post-Cold War world. The post-Cold War, most people are still operating on the basis of Cold War assumptions. You take a Cold War template or you extrapolate a Cold War template. The world is different today. You have the unipolarity, the singular unipolarity is gone. As Ambassador Shivshankar Menon quite often says, today the world is militarily, it may be unipolar. But economically, it is moving toward bipolarity. But politically, it is highly fragmented.
Absolutely.
So you see the number of countries that have come up, middle-level countries, which all feel that they have their the strength, the economic strength, the military strength, the regional influence to try to push their agenda, to try to push their aspirations. This is the world that you're looking at today.
That's right.
And therefore, you need to take full advantage of the opportunities that this world gives you.
Right.
Aware of the challenges, of course. There are risks that you have to take, and I think that is what I would compliment this government on having done. Of having taken the risk because you want to get the reward of a leapfrogging impact on your economy, on technology, and the national development. And that I think is what has resulted in the number of initiatives that you have taken of being able to make the U.S. understand what our compulsions are, what our perspectives are, what our geopolitical outlook is sitting here, because eventually geography matters a lot.
Exactly.
People have forgotten that when you talk about geopolitics, geography is more than half of it.
Exactly.
and therefore, the EAM said this the other day as well, people talk about India-Russia relations. And they say that you're dependent on arms from Russia. Yes, we've had a large defense cooperation with Russia. The point is there is also a geopolitical outlook that you need to look at. With people don't, you look at the space which is above India, the entire Eurasian space. You have China here, you have Russia there, you have the Central Asia in between, and you have the Afghanistan that NATO withdrew from, and you have that space which is extending from Central Asia to the Caspian to the Caucasus. That is our neighborhood. And we need to see what we need to do at all given times to look at the Russia-China interaction, look at the turbulence which is there. Now, it is a sign of great maturity in India-U.S. relations. Fareed Zakaria in CNN asked the National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan the other day that how do you deal with these countries that he mentioned a lot of countries that do not support the U.S. on Ukraine, but Jake Sullivan picked on India. And basically said that we understand that they have their own compulsions.
Exactly.
So the point is to take what is your strategic convergence and to move forward rather than chase some divergence which you cannot remove.
But that's it.
And that is the maturity. That's the maturity that we see
in our 2 years. This has come because if you remember, 2 years ago, the American administration officials were talking about CAATSA, imposing sanctions against India for getting S-400,
about circumventing sanctions, etc.
So it's no longer the talk. I didn't see this in Washington D.C. when I was there during the Prime Minister's visit. No such talk about CAATSA, sanctions, nothing.
So that is the sign of a relationship that has come of age.
Absolutely. So
that's very important.
And that's where you've actually homed on to the strategic convergence that you were speaking about. So, having talked about what China sees it or doesn't see it, we shouldn't bother about it. What about Russia, our old friend? You were, you're a Russia specialist, if I may call it, and of course other things, but you were in Russia. How would Russia see this? They don't comment normally on any of the relationships.
Look, any country that has enjoyed a close relationship and a close partnership would like that partnership to continue. And would be somewhat unhappy to see that being diluted or that exclusivity being diluted. But this is the world today. And Russia understands it as much as anybody else. That today you have a world, again, you don't have the binaries of the Cold War. So once you've left the binaries of the Cold War, you do have a situation where you are not exclusively bound. You cannot have a congruence of interest with any one country.
On everything.
Yeah, that congruence.
Yeah.
Congruence is the
Okay.
old term in geometry. Old geometry term. Everything is like that. Yes. But you cannot have that.
Right.
And therefore, we do have a whole range of subjects on which we have common interest with Russia.
Sure.
As I said, the Eurasian space,
Yeah.
defense cooperation.
Correct.
So that is there. But at the same time, you do have a whole lot of other interests. You do have important strategic interests elsewhere.
Right.
We do have, if you look at it from from geography again, India has a Eurasian
Outreach
flank
yeah.
and a maritime flank.
Yeah.
And our security problems on both are different.
Absolutely.
And we have to address both of them in a different way.
Correct.
So, I mean, Russia does understand it. If it does not, it has to understand it. But I see that there is constant conversation with Russia on this subject.
Right.
And things are carrying on perfectly well. In today's world, you should look at relationships, something like joint ventures. So you tie up with another company, in this case, another country,
Exactly.
on all the subjects that you share interest in and promote those interests,
Right.
while permitting your joint venture with other countries
To continue.
and to the extent that you have convergent interests.
Right.
And this will work perfectly well until such time as one doesn't step on the toes of the other.
Correct.
And that is the nimbleness of foreign policy that you require.
Which I think has been, like you said, it's been little, bold and unconventional.
But we have done that. We have done multilateralism, what is these days often called mini-lateralism.
Exactly.
As you can see,
Right.
the number of various groupings that we are part of,
Sure.
groupings that don't talk to each other,
Correct.
groupings in which we are the only common member,
Yeah.
but we have done that.
G20 and SCO. I mean,
So many of
so
them you
many.
could name.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's true.
The correct comparison would be quad and SCO. Quad and SCO.
Quad and SCO. True. That's absolutely true. One final question. So, from here on, as the U.S. moves into the election cycle 6 months later, maybe, or a year later, India moves into the election cycle. Coming back to the U.S.-India relationship, where we started off our conversation on, what is it that needs to be done to make sure that we don't flounder again? Is it implementation? Is it getting the top leadership to work top down? How does that work?
Well, I think both. Implementation is very, very important.
Right.
And one of the reasons why some of the earlier understandings with the US did not work was because of failure of implementation. I would say on both sides,
Yeah.
not just on one side, on both sides.
Correct.
So, especially given the game-changing agreements that have come up in this present US visit,
Yes.
implementation and quick implementation is very important, and imaginative implementation. And sometimes you have to get out of your mindset, you have to get out of the habits of doing things as you did them in the past, because
Right.
these are new areas where you're
Exactly.
functioning in new ways. That's important.
Yeah.
The political changes you cannot predict.
No.
There's nothing you can do about it.
Correct.
Now, I would say, knowing India, that I don't see a change in the attitudes in India coming.
Right.
India will remain strong.
Sure.
We have to see how politics in the US.
Yeah.
See, there's one fact about strategic thinking and political calculation. In any democracy, economic and immediate political compulsions score over the strategic, because the immediate economic and political compulsions will win you or lose your election.
Exactly.
The strategy gives results in maybe 10 years from now.
Exactly.
So that tussle is always there.
That's true.
But I think that we are set on a course which is very different from a course that we had set in the past. So it is bilaterally very different.
Right.
Externally, the situation is conducive in the sense that the pressures on us from outside force us together and force us to take action.
Exactly.
So that hopefully will take us forward.
I'm sure things have been thought through, and I'm sure it will be different than what has happened before. That's what I sensed in DC, and I sense it here in Delhi after coming back talking to people. So let's see what happens. Maybe 6 months down the line, 1 year down the line, we'll talk about this again. But thanks for your time and your insights.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Pleasure.
Great to be with you.
So that was Mr. Raghavan telling us what he thinks has come out of the Prime Minister's visit to the U.S. and the larger geopolitics of the relations between major powers, of which India is also now becoming important player. So do keep watching StratNewsGlobal, and of course you know where to reach us. Our social media handles are visible to you on the screen. Do keep sending feedback. They're valuable to us, the comments that you send. And of course, keep watching and subscribing to StratNewsGlobal.com and our YouTube channel too. For the time being, it's goodbye.